It has been over 5 years since I sat down with ayahuasca, and man, did she have a lot to teach me this time around. I felt like I was breaking the biggest psychic fever you could ever imagine. And in this podcast, I sit down with none other than Jungian scholar Erick Godsey to break it all down. This week's show is brought to you by Onnit, onnit.com/Aubrey, by The Cold Plunge, thecoldplunge.com, and by the Fit for Service Academy, aubreymarcus.com/FFS Academy. My ayahuasca journey started off right in the deep end. The first visions I had were some of the most intense that I had all week. And with that, I got the opportunity to explore how to deal with that kind of darkness that you find within and that darkness that you find without. Truly, I felt like there was not a sickness or a darkness or a shadow that's found in the world, in the human collective, that I couldn't find in myself. And the ayahuasca spotlight was sure to shine its light of awareness on every nook and cranny. I'm really excited to share this podcast with you guys. As I said, it's been over 5 years since I got to give you a full ayahuasca report, and this is one of the richest psychedelic journeys of my whole life. But before we get started, a word from our sponsors. Our first sponsor today is Onnit, and this week we are talking about the Immune Support Collection. Now, we are still in winter in much of the world, and there's immune challenges year-round either way. And there's a bunch of amazing products offered by Onnit that are going to just help support you year-round. Some of those include Shroom Tech Immune. This has all of the best nutritional mushrooms that have been shown to help support the immune system. Virotech, which contains a combination of zinc and lysine and vitamin C, alpha-lipoic acid, all kinds of different vitamins and nutrients to help you out. Total Hemp, our CBD product, which is going to help with your overall relaxation and total function through the endocannabinoid system. Vitamin D spray with K2 and MCT oil. Vitamin D is absolutely crucial, especially when you're not getting a whole bunch of sun. The human organism was designed to get a bunch of sun, and vitamin D is like one of those universal levers. And then, of course, key minerals, all of those base minerals like calcium, magnesium, molybdenum, all of these things that the body is in constant need for to just operate at the highest level. And spirulina chlorella, our capsulized green product. All of these have a host of great benefits for the body. You can learn a bunch more. Go to onnit.com/Aubrey and check out the Immune Support Collection. And as always, save 10% off. So onnit.com/Aubrey for 10% off the Immune Collection. And the next sponsor is The Cold Plunge. Now, you might have seen it on my Instagram, but I got upgraded to a badass new cold plunge system. Ozone and UV filtered, a constant circulating temperature as cold as you possibly want. Now, right now, it is freezing ass cold here in Austin, so the whole world is a cold plunge, especially my pool, but it's going to warm up soon, and I'm really grateful to have this amazing cold plunge, which not only works as well or better than any cold plunge I've ever seen, but it's also sexier. It looks like a modern tub. And it's dope. These guys do an amazing job. They came up and set it up for me. And I just really love everything they're about. And I love everything about this cold plunge. It's such an important practice to help you drop back into your body, clear your mind, help you move through some stress and inflammation, and also train that mental toughness, train that mental override, that part of you that doesn't want to get in the cold plunge, but does it anyway. So if you're into a cold plunge practice, make sure to check this out. Go to thecoldplunge.com/pages/amp and you'll get $111 off. And these cold plunges are a lot cheaper than many of the professional cold plunges out there. So you're already going to be getting a good deal, and now you get an even better deal. thecoldplunge.com/pages/amp. And our last sponsor of the day is the Fit for Service Academy, our new community app available in the App Store. Now, I've talked to you guys about the importance of community and all of the different practices that we put in the app, the master classes, the guided breathworks, the guided meditations, the guided ecstatic dances, the sound healings, everything loaded up in a social media surrogate where you have a bunch of people who are just going to receive what you say. You can share whatever you're going through, share what you're working on, and find people to take the journey with you. But what I want to talk to you guys today about is that we are starting a new feature where all live podcasts are going to be live streamed on the app. So anytime I'm with a person in studio or in someone's house, I'm going to set up out the app for a live stream, and you're going to get a live look at the podcast long before they release. And also, as an added bonus, I'm going to be putting a prompt to ask for questions in the app. And so we'll have an exclusive question answered by the guest just for the Fit for Service Academy community. So check it out. Go to aubreymarcus.com/FFS Academy, or go to your app store and download the Fit for Service Academy. aubreymarcus.com/FFS Academy, or go to the app store, Fit for Service Academy. And now, an uninterrupted conversation with Erick Godsey. The ayahuasca trip report. In some ways, I feel like this is kind of where podcasting really began for me. You know, because it was that first podcast I did with Rogan. I think it was JRE 127, something like that.
It is.
Yeah. And I'd done a couple other podcasts with him, but that was the one that like, I felt like something happened in that, you know, where I just was fresh off my first cycle of 3 sits of ayahuasca with Maestro Orlando Chuandama, and I came back fresh and I was just totally blown away. I mean, I'd been doing psychedelics for over 10 years at that point, almost 12 years at that point. I was about 30 when that happened. And, but this was something else. It was something completely different, and not a lot of people were talking about it then. So here we are, like almost 10 years later, and it's another, it's another dive into the water. I've drank ayahuasca. I drank ayahuasca 14 times total. 14 sits and several broken into several different cycles. But the last time I did it was 5 years ago. And I was really actually blown away by how much I'd forgotten. Like totally. I had completely forgotten, because what I had in my mind subtly reduced it to was the visionary state.
Right.
You know, like, what did I see? You know, what were the visions like? And it occurred to me, it really struck me that it's not necessarily about the visions. Like the visions are a tool to get you the lessons that you need. And I kind of knew this, but I'd forgotten, you know, because the stories are all about, what'd you see? You know, but that wasn't it at all, man.
Yeah. And what's so just perfect is the first podcast I ever heard was that podcast. I didn't know who you were. I didn't know who Joe Rogan was. And that was the podcast that started my entire journey that brought me here.
I think for a lot of people, that was a big podcast. I mean, of any podcast I've done, that's the one that most people have pointed to, who've been like, whoa, that podcast was a shift. And I think it was partly the stories that I told, but it was partly just the effect that it had on me, that being so fresh and me just coming in just completely like lit up from this experience and just on a different wavelength than I was used to. And but here we are back again. This time was a bit, very much different, of course, based on my experience, based on everything I'd done, and also based on the style that that the ayahuasca is served at Soltara. First of all, I have to say, Soltara runs an incredible, virtually impeccable operation. Like they really do an amazing job. And the healers they bring in are Shipibo healers, traditional Shipibo healers. And it's my first opportunity to sit with traditional Shipibo healers. All the healers that I've been with before have all been in the mestizo tradition, which is a little bit different. And I think it's worth noting what the difference is. Maybe I should back up, one quick second. For those of you who don't know what ayahuasca is, it's a combination of what I have in my hand right here, which is a twisting vine that contains an MAOI inhibitor or some chemical derivation thereof, which actually allows DMT to become orally active. And what supplies the DMT is typically a series of leaves. The chacruna leaf is the primary leaf, and that's actually the only leaf they use in the brew that they serve at Soltara. Oftentimes, they'll add other leaves that contain DMT, like opoyahe and wambisa, and sometimes some admixture plants. But the core of it is the vine in combination with the leaves supplying the DMT, the vine making it orally active and sending you on a 4 to 10 hour ride with this medicine that has just this seemingly incredible intelligence to show you absolutely the things that are unseen and absolutely what you need to both heal and also open your mind to what you need to see.
Yeah. One of the things that I feel deeply with ayahuasca, so I've only done it now in the Shipibo tradition at Soltara Healing Center, but it seems like the intelligence of the plant dances with the intelligence of your personal psyche to produce exactly what you need, also through the mediums that you will best understand it. Like I know someone who's a somatic body healer, and a lot of their messages are somatic.
Yep.
For me, because I'm obsessed with dreams, most of mine are visions with symbolic dream like imagery. And then for people I know who are deeply attached, or that the way that they experience the world is emotional. It tends to be emotions. And there's this beautiful like dance between the intelligence of this plant and your psyche.
Yep. And, for me, it became really clear that what I needed was healing.
Yeah.
And I wasn't actually going in. I was going in like, I want to see some really cool shit. I want to talk to all the animals. And like, I've had experiences where I've talked to so many beings, and there are those experiences, and we'll cover all of that. But really fundamentally, the through line was healing a deep sickness. And it was the sickness of all of the world. Every bit of conditioning, every bit of toxicity that I've generated from my own mind, that I've adopted from societal norms, that I've taken on from the world. It really reminded me of that story that we've told a couple times about the Rainmaker. And, why don't you tell the story of the Rainmaker, and I'll explain where I am in the journey, so that it makes sense.
Yeah, so this is for sure my favorite story. And it was a story that someone told to Carl Jung in the last quarter of his life, and he became obsessed with it, and he would tell it before most of his lectures. And it goes like this. Jung's friend, who was like an anthropologist, goes to China, ends up in a village. The village is going through a drought. And the Westerner goes up to the elders and it's like, how are you going to fix this? Bringing the Western mentality. Are you going to build new wells? Are you going to ship in water? What are you going to do? And the elders looked at the Westerner just kind of like how a lot of indigenous wise people look at elders or look at Westerners. And it's just kind of confused and like, oh, you don't get it. We're calling the Rainmaker. The Rainmaker's coming. And later that day, an old man comes to the village. The Westerner watches the elders excitedly go up to this old man. They guide him to a hut at the edge of the village. The old man goes in. No one goes in or comes out for 3 days. And at the end of the third day, it rains all night. The Westerner trudges through mud and sprouting plants to get to the front of that hut first thing in the morning. The old man comes out and the Westerner says, what did you do? How did you do this? And the old man says, I came from a land that was in order. And because the land was in order, it did what it needed to do when it needed to do it. And so there's never a drought. I came here and the land was out of order and it infected me. And so I had to put myself into order. And once I came into order, the land came into order. Once the land came into order, it did what it had to do. And so it rained.
The deep wisdom of something that, Hermes Trismegistus, the, mystic philosopher, was talking about, as within, so without, so that's the wisdom of the Rainmaker, is that everything is connected. We're all a microcosm of the macro. And so if we can truly, truly heal ourselves, we can truly heal the outer world, the collective. Yeah. And so what I realized was that I'd done an excellent job becoming completely infected with the disorder of the world, particularly over this last year. I mean, It's been the absolute most chaotic year I've ever known in the entirety of my life.
Same.
And so I think partly because of that, and partly because of my own tendencies to, and susceptibilities to it, partly because of my own innate nature, I think I'm a type of being that is actually designed to absorb all of the sickness and all of the maladies and all of the darkness and everything, so that I can figure out how to fix it. Either to potentially fix that, and in doing so, help fix the collective.
Right.
Also, in fixing it, talk about it. Talk about the go on podcasts, write books, talk about the ways in which and the strategies in which I was able to kind of bring myself into order so other people can as well. But I realized I was like, wow, I've really crushed it on part A. Part A is getting thoroughly,
100%.
completely infected with everything because I could feel it. There was literally nothing that I saw out in the collective, any greed, any jealousy, any anger, any posturing, any need for validation, anything. I was like, oh, it's all here. It's all in here. Anything that I've been upset about in the collective, it's all in me too.
Yep.
And that was like this really fundamental awakening. And I could kind of feel it coming up. And I think that's one of the things about ayahuasca. The moment you commit to it, it starts to work. You know, your psyche knows, and potentially also because I've had, you know, experiences with ayahuasca, and we've developed that relationship over the years. I was skidding into that. I was skidding into the ceremony like, damn. And what does that look like though? It just looks like I was anxious and antsy and depressive and disconnected, and everything was like bubbling up until we got to that first ceremony. And I was like, man, I fucking need this. You know, before, like a couple weeks earlier, I was like, yeah, it's going to be cool. And then by the time I was on the eve, I was like, I'm fucking desperate.
Yeah.
Like I really, really, really need this. And you know, she was there. She was there.
One of the things that comes up when I hear that is there's a really interesting vein of research that looks at what happens to domesticated animals that are meant to be wild. And basically what they find is that when you take a creature that evolved to be wild in a certain environment and you put it in a zoo, they acquire mental disorders. Like there's stories of depressed monkeys will isolate themselves from the tribe and will just go stare at a wall out in the cage. Elephants will grind their tusks all the way down on stones because they're anxious. Birds will rip out their own feathers. We have no examples of that happening with those animals when they're out in the environment that they're meant to be in. And our culture is sick. And to be in the sick culture, it infects us.
Yeah. And, you know, orcas with their floppy fins.
Yeah.
And, you know, the lists go on. And we're not stuck in a zoo, but we are a zoo of our own creation, our own mental prison that we're in. And, you know, we have to take responsibility for creating the walls of this. Yes, of course, these ideas are out there, these restrictions of freedom, these things that try and take our power away and say, no, you're not a powerful being. You don't have the immune system for this. You need to wait for a shot. You can't handle this. You got to hide. You got to isolate. You got to do all of these things. And for some of us, maybe we're so sick that we do. And so I'm not saying that that's not sound advice for certain parts of the population, but
know where you're at.
Nonetheless, this has now become the universal where we're all kind of trying to manage us being in a sick state, a state where we're terrified of death. We're terrified of exposing the true, raw, vulnerable truth of who we are, of acknowledging ourselves as divine beings. You know, we're just locked in this place. So we become desperate for small hits of validation, little, you know, refreshes on our Instagram or little things that other people are saying about us. And we get caught in this thing, you know, what Charles Eisenstein calls the myth of separation. We're separated from source. We're separated from the truth of who we are. And we're separated from our brothers and sisters and partners and family because we're not ever showing who we are because we're afraid of the judgment that they're going to cast upon us, which we've internalized as our own judgment. And so we're locked in our own fucking zoo and our fins are getting floppy and we're grinding our tusks and we're reaching for orange rattling pill bottles to say, save me, save me. And everybody's saying, this will save you. This will save you. You're like, great, whoa, but it's not fucking saving me. What the hell am I going to do? And this cycle just gets stronger and stronger and stronger until you say, stop. Let me find who I am again.
Yep.
And that's really ultimately, like if I'm going to encapsulate, this is a journey to find who you really are and how powerful you are as a sovereign being and how powerful we all are. Because there's no special here. You know, it's not like, I'm the chosen special one. Nah. I'm one of everyone who's all special, who's all divine, who's always powerful. And that's another game of the world that's been inflicted. Oh, this is the priest class. These are the Brahmins. These are the special ones. No, we're all rainmakers. We're all mystics and shamans and warriors and kings. And, all of the things, lovers, we're all of the archetypes.
Yeah.
And we're just told and we've believed that we're not. And so it's really rediscovering that. And when we do that, all of this other stuff kind of fades away. It becomes like, once you know who you are, everything becomes way, way easier. And that was like a big part of the healing, was puking and shitting away all of the death of the denial of who I am and all of the rot of not living in my blistering truth, pouring it into the toilet and into the buckets, and then emerging closer. Now, I'm not going to say like I totally I fucking did it. I did it. It's raining. Is it raining where you are? No, I did. But I made a lot of progress.
The metaphor that most resonates with me is you look at humanity and we're a symphony, but we're all different instruments, but each of us have a rainmaker tuning function of the instrument that we are. And a violin is not inherently more special than a cello. But if both are fucking in tune and playing their thing, it's beautiful. And that metaphor also lends itself to, as long as you have a heartbeat and a breath, the song is going. So you're not done, but can you be in this moment in tune? You're rainmaking.
Yeah.
But at every moment you can step out of that shit. And at every moment you can step back in.
And there's so many stories that'll drag you out on some meandering path into a dark woods that leads to nowhere.
Become a screeching, broken one-string
yeah,
violin.
totally. Just banging your drum into the abyss, of delusion.
Yeah.
And that's, I'll cover that when I go through and start reading through kind of my report of my experiences. But I had a really visceral encounter of what that delusion looks like and how easy it is for stories to weave this choking fog, this smoke that blinds and stings our eyes and makes it so that we can't see left from right, up from down, truth from falsity. And we're just caught in momentum, righteously so, thinking that we're going the right way, but we're just meandering on a story rather than, following the light of truth.
Amen. There's a place for stories, but the map is not the territory.
Right. And it's just being mindful of when it's often always a story, but it's being mindful of like, what is the story and how close does the story track truth? Because we need these stories.
Right.
Stories help us, create reality in many ways, but they can very easily get told in a way that's going to lead us to a dead end place.
Does it bring you more into attunement with what you are, or does it bring you away?
Yeah. So going back to the difference between the Shipibo style and the Mestizo style. So in the Shipibo style, we had two great Shipibo healers. And the Shipibo is a particular tribe that has developed many of the things that we know about ayahuasca. They've kind of held that close. It's only 30, 40,000 people in the world. And they have a deep, several thousand-year-old tradition of, cultivating the ayahuasca tea and developing their lineage. And it's very kind of specific about how they do that. Now, ayahuasca has been in many different countries and many different jungles, and there's many other different styles, even in Peru, which is where I've always done it. The other style, the main style, is the Mestizo style. And so the big difference between the two is in the Mestizo style, there's one or sometimes two shamans, but often one, who is holding basically the center of the room and singing their icaros. And an icaro is a song that's been taught to them by the plants and taught to them by the other shamans and the other maestros that have passed down those songs through their lineage. And these are healing songs. These are songs that are actually directly in resonance with the plants and designed for a purpose, designed to facilitate healing, or sometimes to facilitate something else, sometimes to facilitate pure sorcery or whatever the intention is. But when you're with a good healer, a curandero, or curandera, they're designed to heal in different ways. And they're also designed to move the energy of the plant. And unless you've experienced it,
oh man,
you don't really understand. You don't really understand the power of the icaro.
I remember the first night I drank for the first time, and it was before they sung, and it was just darkness, but I could feel like a psychedelic type of DMT thing moving through me. And the moment they started singing, it's like the three-dimensional sea of pixels all woke up, and it felt like the air came alive. and the night came alive and the insects started singing, like instantaneously with the first guttural utter of the Icaros.
With the first whistle. Usually always that's when you know it's about to begin.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, here we go. Here we go. And then that first kind of thing comes out. In the mestizo style, same, you drink and then it's silent and you wait. And then they wait for the energy to build and they wait for the right time. But they'll bring the whole group through a series of different Icaros. So they're basically, imagine them like a DJ that's playing for the whole crowd, playing for the whole dance floor. And they're bringing in a crescendo their own playlist of Icaros that they don't think about it beforehand. It's just what are they feeling in the moment for the collective. And so you hear many different types of Icaros and they kind of lead you on a journey. At the end, they go around and provide what's called a benteada, which is a specific healing song for you, which is often the same song for everybody. In rare occasions, like in the story that I told on the podcast with Hamilton about Maestro Alberto, when Whitney had, some bad magic in her, as they call it, or the medicine, got squirrely. He sang a very intense, different Icaro than everybody else to help really heal something specific. But typically the benteadas are usually similar unless you have a very specific issue. And then they'll often offer you a soplato where they blow tobacco, or my first shaman, Maestro Orlando, actually blew cinnamon at the top of your crown.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And then that kind of closes the ceremony. That gives you a little bit of individuality. And then they wait a little bit and then, light the candle and exit the room. And most of the time you're still in it to a certain degree.
Yeah.
But, and that's the mestizo style. And I was used to that. And I still have a great love for that style. The Shipibo style is different. And there's two healers, Maestro Teo and Maestra Marina. And they actually go around and instead of singing to the collective, they sing only individual Icaros. Well, they sing a couple to the group at the start.
Right.
So to get the medicine moving, they'll sing a couple together at the start, and then they'll start moving around in the circle and singing individual Icaros, similar to the benteada, but different, individual Icaros to each person, one-on-one. Just all about you, tapping into your field and singing you the healing song that you need. And really, like, if I was going to make a categorical, difference, I would say that the Shipibo style to me is really so specific for your healing.
Yeah.
It's very targeted. You're like working with a surgeon.
Exactly.
Who's like looking right at you the whole time, when they're with you. And just delivering to you what you need.
Yeah.
Whereas the other one is kind of collectively, getting everybody into the same kind of resonance and providing the healing. Now, of course, everybody's journeys are different. But it's just a different style. Both are fucking incredible.
Yeah.
But this was the first time experiencing the Shipibo. And for me, with the priority really clearly being on my healing, it was exactly what I needed.
Yeah.
Exactly what I needed. Whew. So I went in. First of all, in the morning there, they have a lemongrass vomitivo, which is a really good idea.
Yeah.
Because I think it helps get people over the fear of purging.
Right.
Which I think is really important because a lot of people get stuck in oh my God, I don't want to purge. Everybody's going to hear me. And what you do is you drink as much lemongrass as you possibly can, and you just till you're absolutely bloated, and then you purge, and then everybody cheers you on, right? But lemongrass is not a emetic. It doesn't like make you want to purge. It's actually quite nice.
Yeah.
It's kind of a delicious tea that
not anymore.
You know what's funny is because I was never nauseous. It was just the pressure in my stomach.
Right.
I could have drank lemongrass the whole time, and it wouldn't have bothered me because it's the nausea that actually makes it. Whereas ayahuasca makes you nauseous. So like I couldn't think of drinking ayahuasca without like shuddering, because it's the nausea that actually gives you that. But it's not easy because I think the body's like, yeah, cool, lemongrass tea. If you would just stop drinking so much, you dumb animal, like we're fine with this. Like we don't need to puke. This is not necessary. Why are you trying to do this? But it's really good because it gets you in the practice. And I think it's also a test to see how much you can communicate with your body and say, body, we're going to vomit now. And the body's like, no, we're not. We're like, yeah, we are. And it's kind of developing that relationship where you're trying to like, can the mind communicate effectively with the body? And I think that's really what it's testing, and also getting you, it's a really bonding experience for the group. So I think that was a really intelligent thing they've done. I've never had that, offered in any other ceremony. So we do that in the morning. And then again, skidding in, head first, diving, chewing on the dust as I'm going towards first base of my healing. And get in there, and we start with 1 cup. And I knew that probably wasn't going to be enough. So as soon as the time was right to offer the 2nd cup, I was the first to, flash my little red light and jump up and get the 2nd cup. And, drank the 2nd cup. And then, the experience began. And it wasn't the flood experience that, I kind of remember of just like visions, because that's, of course, what you think about in your mind. That's what I remembered. But it was, it was more subtle. And then the visions started to come much more subtle, similar to what the darkness retreat was, where I always described it like the onset or the twilight of ayahuasca. That was kind of where the visions took. And in the darkness, of course, like when I saw the laughing Buddha and I saw these, things would appear. And so it begun. And I'll go through, and I'm gonna go through and read little different snippets of this, and then we'll talk about them. I encountered an archon, mechanistic, bent on destruction, defilement, corruption, and absolute. I encountered a shadow demon. Those were 2 different things. So this was the first vision I got, and I was like, oh, great, straight to the demons. And if anybody listened to my last, ayahuasca report, it was a massive challenging experience with what I called the world crusher, which is this gigantic demon, maybe the capital D demon. And that was 5 years ago. And I told that on, Fighter and the Kid. I told it on Rogan. I think I told it on one of my podcasts too.
That was the one where months before you had a really intense dream where something came to you and said, I'm going to kill you.
That was like 6 weeks before ayahuasca, when I didn't even know which day, because I was only drinking it once. I had a bone-chilling dream, and I don't have a lot of dreams. You're the dream expert, and I'm really excited when I have a dream because I can tell you about it. But I rarely have dreams that are worth remembering or kind of interesting. But in this dream, I was in absolute black, and this demon, this small demon, comes to me, appears to me, looks at me, and then stares me right in the eyes, kind of like in Stranger Things when Eleven goes into that world where it's all black and like things appear, and this demon just looks at me like, oh, here you are. And he looks me right in the eye and says, I'm going to kill you on July 27th. And I was like, yeah. And I like woke up, and of course, and then I checked my calendar right then, and it was like ayahuasca, July 27th.
That would fuck me up, fam.
It was fucking intense. And then of course I ended up meeting that demon, and then that demon virtually, it felt like he did kill me, stole my heart gem. But anyways, that's a different story or a different experience. But this one wasn't nearly as scary or intense. It was just like I could just see them. They weren't particularly interacting. Now, the archons are from the Gnostic texts, and that's basically like these massive demon beings that are representing some different archetype of the shadow, some different archetype of destruction, some different archetype of evil to a certain degree. And I'm not incredibly familiar with the mythology, but I can tell that this was like a being of that nature. But what was really interesting about it was that it was completely mechanistic. It was like a transformer, like a Decepticon, but without any personality. It was just like unreachable. So in the conclusion of my previous journey with demons, I ended up kissing the world crusher on the forehead, and it changed the whole thing. I provided it love. So I kind of had a strategy. But what was interesting about the Mecha Archon, as I call it, was it had no soul. It had no life.
There was nothing to convert or change.
Exactly. It's like you can kiss your fucking Roomba vacuum, and it's not going to change what it's just going to suck dirt.
Right.
Like it doesn't matter how much love you give your vacuum. It's like it's going to just vacuum. And like that mecha archon was just going to destroy. It was a machine built on destroying. And I could sense that it kind of represented all of the machines that we've used to destroy, all the bombs, all the guns, all the contraptions, all the artifices of war. And that collectively created this energy of this destroyer, but it was powered by the people.
Right.
And the people had soul, and the people could be reached, just like that other demon. The beings could be reached because they were alive. So I had no idea what to do with the mecha archon other than this idea that maybe there's nothing to do with that because it was the people. And then pretty close, then there was another demon that was a being. It was a living being that appeared in my vision. And that was, he had just a completely blacked out face. It was all shadow, and he was sitting in a chair and just kind of like quietly emitting evil. And, I could not see his face. Sometimes I could see little red eyes like piercing the black. And he was like well dressed in like a suit of some sort.
Goosebumps.
And so I was like, man, I kind of knew what I needed to do with the shadow thing, but it seemed like difficult to approach. I was like, I got to give it love. So I actually called on Saint Michael. I had the idea to call on Saint Michael for help. And, beautifully, Saint Michael appeared and we had a dialogue. And so I'll write this. Saint Michael was with me. He showed me that his sword was blunt because it was not meant to cut, only to separate truth from delusion, only to point the way to love. He showed me that the only way to combat the energy of the archon and the demon was to love them and keep loving them and keep loving them. Love the fallen ones all the way back to God. It was a beautiful, beautiful encounter with that, angelic being. And I think we oftentimes think of Saint Michael with his sword, and we imagine him like a warrior cutting and stabbing and slicing. And he's like, no. This sword is blunt. This sword is just to separate truth from delusion, just to anoint with love. Like that's the purpose of why I carry this sword. And so again, reminding me that there is no way to combat darkness with violence. Violence isn't in of itself going to reinforce that power. Reminds me of the fifth element. The fifth element where that giant blob of evil is coming. And then, the Starfleet or whatever is like, let's launch our nuclear phasars against it. And then it just grows bigger.
Right.
When they try to attack it. It's just like the same energy of attack and destroy is its energy. Yep. So it just reinforces it. So the only way ultimately, that the fifth element defeats it is with love.
Yeah.
And it's a true story. That's one of the reasons why that movie's so good. It's a fucking true story. So with that knowledge, I'll read my next piece. When I loved the shadow demon, so I went up and I offered the shadow demon love. I saw his face, hideous by the standards of the world, and I saw that he was born as a baby, hideous in the eyes of his parents, his society. So he chose the path of power instead of love, the only path that seemed available for him to access the force that he craved, love. So when I came up to him with love, the shadow was revealed from his face, and he had all of these his face was completely distorted and bubbled and burned. Again, it's like the story of the Phantom of the Opera, right? Like so hideous to the world that he hides his face and develops his voice and craves that power, but really all he wants is love, but he doesn't feel that love is accessible to him. So he chooses the surrogate of love, power.
Yep.
Because power has force. Love is the most powerful force in the universe. But if you can't get love, well, you can get power. You can move people from fear instead of moving people from love. So at least you have the surrogate, the saccharin of the sugar of love, So, and as I saw him as a baby, like reduced to that, I could see the metaphor for how so many people who seek that path of power, they feel like they're unlovable.
Yep.
And so they're just trying to maximize their ability to get love in any way they can, but they can't get love. So they're just like, all right, well, fuck it. Power it is.
And what comes to mind is there was an image that got popular on the internet of Mitch McConnell a couple of months ago where he looked just so fucking sick. And to a lot of people, Mitch McConnell is the ultimate representation of that force of evil, of the evil force in the chair with the red eyes. And what's interesting is like when I look at him, I see a man who has not tasted love, like real, like shoulder relaxing, jaw unclenching, surrendering love. And people's response to whatever figure in the culture that we project, the evilness onto, what do? We attack them, we criticize them, we send them hate. Like there's so many beautiful people I know who fucking hate a human they haven't met that represents what they don't like in office and on all sides. And if this metaphor is a reflection of how energy is actually moving, we are feeding what we hate. Every time we tweet at them, every time we share something with vitriol and poison in it, and it feeds, like we can all see that there's a mechanistic machine eating the planet right now. Like we all see it. And a lot of people's response to trying to help it, instead of spreading love in the part of the garden where they're at, it's just to fucking send their nuclear phasars into the blob.
Yep.
And it feeds it because all these humans that are doing these things were born babies, at some point didn't know love, and they still have a baby boy or baby girl inside of them. And every time we attack them, that thing continues to guard harder, seeks more power.
Yep.
Like how many people fed Trump who didn't want to feed Trump?
No doubt. That's the key lesson. It's a lesson that Starhawk, beautifully exemplified in the fifth sacred thing, where the attacking force was coming to overrun utopia. And she's, the people of their society were like, we have a seat for you at the table. We have a seat for you at the table. And despite all the torture and the killing and everything that they were doing initially, that eventually wore them down. And they laid down their guns and they're like, and fought off the people who were more vehement. And they're like, we want the seat at this table. We want love. We really do want love. And it's going to take a little while because they're not going to trust it.
Right.
But the more that love is offered, ultimately it's what defeats it. Now, of course, there's those considerations of in a temporary situation, someone comes in your house and they're trying to kill you. You may not have that option. You may not be able to love them and save your family in that moment. So you may have to use force.
Right.
And that's okay. But ultimately what will win against that energy at large is love.
Yeah.
And the more that we can practice that when when the gun isn't pointed at ourself or at our beloved and we have to take action, if we can love, it's going to win, because it's what everybody wants.
Every conscious creature,
even the shadow demon. I too am the shadow demon and the archon, as I am all things, infected with all sicknesses that the world has. It is my opportunity and gift to be able to heal myself and thus be able to help heal the world. Nothing else matters. If I cannot heal myself, there is no hope that I can heal any aspect of the world. It must start with me. And perhaps, as the mythical rainmaker or the great kahuna, if the task is done thoroughly, the task ends with me as well, as within, so without. I don't know what to do about the Mecha Archon. I suppose that it will deanimate when the energy that supports it runs out. It is not separate from us. It is us, just aggregated. Which is a priori, the sickness within or the sickness without? It doesn't matter. Chicken and egg. A cyclical dependency and necessity that becomes a Zen koan when you try to arrive at origin.
Where's the beginning of the circle, right?
Right. That's what I was trying to figure out. And it was like a deep philosophical contemplation of, okay, is this coming from with us, originating from us, or are we feeling this from the collective darkness and then assuming it ourselves and then feeding it back? It's impossible to figure that out.
Right. It feels like the question to ask is, where am I on the circle?
Right.
Start there.
Yeah, it's the only question. The other one's like, again, it's like the Zen koan.
Yeah.
You know,
where does the circle begin?
Yeah, it's like you can't possibly figure it out. There's no way. There's no way to understand that.
That's the wrong question.
So that was kind of a clear way to say, all right, forget it all.
Right.
Like I got me and I got this thing and it's sick.
Right.
So let me heal it.
Exactly.
And like that's it.
Tend to your part of the garden.
Is that Jordan Peterson who loves talking about that?
Jack Kornfield is actually
Jack Kornfield. Yeah, absolutely. All right. So then with that, as I was kind of pondering the challenges in the collective and challenges dealing with this darkness within and without, I recognized that faith was an important thread. And I touched faith, but it was elusive, ephemeral. It was the answer to so many questions and so many problems. Faith, 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 my child. Faith is a funny thing, I think we've been encouraged to have faith in things that were not faith-worthy, things that were like, put your faith in this, but that's not faith. Faith is a knowing that love is the fabric of the universe, that love will ultimately prevail, that it will all work out. Whether this life or whether a million lives from now, like it's going to work out. It's a knowing. It's a knowing that everything is all right. And you don't have to know why. And you don't have to know how. And that's why if you do know how, it's not faith. Like that, if you know it,
right.
If you know it, if you can figure it out and explain why, it's not faith. It's just a logical conclusion based on the evidence that you have. That's not it.
Yeah. One of the things that comes to mind is faith is what's required for you to do for the first time a new way of being. And then if it works, it's knowledge. It's if it doesn't work over and over and over again, and you have to override that still whisper inside of you of maybe this isn't the way. That's when faith becomes dogma. It becomes this fucking cage. But faith is the thing that's required to begin for the first time a thing that you don't know will work. Or you don't know that it will unfold in the way that you want it to. And yeah, faith is the thing that has liberated countless numbers of lives. And it's also the thing that has trapped, or what is sold to them as faith, has trapped millions of lives inside of things that don't work.
Which is why I think faith is something that people push against, because people just say, this doesn't make any sense. I know, but just have faith. But really, it doesn't make sense because it shouldn't make any sense because it's wrong.
Right.
Just believe in this absolutely judgmental deity that's punishing and wiping people from the earth and, cursing people to eternal damnation, but have faith in this thing as the savior. And it's like, but really though, doesn't sound cool. That sounds like worse than a good human, like we don't punish people like that. That would be inhumane. But we're going to have faith in it. So people are like, fuck that.
Right.
But real faith is faith in the light itself. Like, no, I have faith. Like I have faith in a benevolent universe. I have faith that love is the fabric of existence.
A image that comes to mind is one of my favorite clips that I've ever seen on YouTube is it's one of the last interviews that somebody did of Carl Jung. And the interview asks Jung, do you believe in God? And Jung gets this really whimsical smile on his face, and he's like, oh, no, I don't believe. I know. But he says it with this beautiful smirk, like he knows what he is saying is going to be misinterpreted by everyone who hears him, and he's still going to say it. Mm-hmm. And it's saying I know with a smirk feels like faith.
Yeah.
Like
I know, but I can never explain it.
Right. And that I don't need to, and I'm still going to go do the fucking thing.
Yeah. 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 And it was difficult to stick with it. It's like anything, practice makes the master. So I could touch it and then I would be like, oh, I don't know if it's going to work. I don't know if I'll get any healing. I don't know if we're going to make it through this challenging times. I don't know if the forces that be are going to, drive us into further and further oppression and then the desire for power. And then it was like, no, faith. Just have faith. Have faith. And so it was like wavering back and forth. And I was able to strengthen it over the time. But I think that's also another, radical way that you can solve a lot of different issues. Is if you have faith, yeah, you can sort out what to do and use your mind. I think the mind is a beautiful tool. But if you have faith that it's all going to work out the way that you'll see the solution, it's like, no, there is a solution. There is a way. There is a next best step. And I have faith that it's going to work out. And maybe I'll fail in this life and this articulation as me carrying this name, but that's okay because I'll be back again and we'll all be back again and we're all one anyways. We're not separate from source. We're not separate from each other. That principle of interbeing that Charles Eisenstein talks about, we're all going to make it. We're all going to, and like if you have that faith, it buffers you from so much suffering. And then allows you to see the potential opportunities and get on your toes, on the balls of your feet instead of on your heels, like, oh my God, what's going on? But it allows you to be nimble. Anybody who's in any kind of mission or any challenging situation, they have to have faith that they're going to make it out.
Right.
Like if you're trapped in a snow, an avalanche, and you're like, I don't know how I'm going to find my way out. Everything looks like up, everything looks like down, nothing makes any sense. Like if you have faith, you'll find your way. If you lose yourself to panic, there's books written about 100%. People who survive these things and don't. It's just this belief, like, no, I'm gonna find a way. I'm gonna get out of here.
Yeah,
I believe that I'm gonna make it, and I know that I'm gonna make it. And that faith is just going to be, it's just going to be the thing that is most likely going to give you the best outcome. Anyways, even from a pragmatic standpoint.
Exactly, and I think that's the point that is the most important is faith when met with your responsibility to try as hard as you possibly can, gives you the best chance. It doesn't mean it will, but it gives you the best chance.
Yep.
And I think that what's important with faith is to bring the totality of your mind with it. But faith is, I will try.
Yep.
And then you actually fucking bring your rationality, your creativity, your intuition, all the faculties.
Even your physicality.
100% along. But faith feels like, for me, for most people, it's that first step. Like it's the mythological idea that you don't get to see the bridge or the trail in the dark forest until you commit, before you can see it. Mm-hmm. And then it reveals. And that's a constant motif.
Yep, no doubt. Ceremony wraps. That first time you walk outside and you look up.
Yes.
Holy shit. I mean, the stars, dude, it's unbelievable. I mean, ayahuasca, as hard as it is worth it just to see the stars.
I almost said those exact words. Like that moment. Like, have you ever used that star app where you can put, it's like that, but real life. Like it's hard to articulate, but when you're on a planet and you're looking up at the sky, it feels static unless you're really tuned in. But when you just did ayahuasca, you can feel, and I don't know what it is, but you can feel that like you're on this moving orb in space and the entire fucking heavens are illuminated. Mm-hmm. It feels like I can almost see like the different characters that we've made up from, like almost like my mind knows, and it's fucking bright in a way that's
unreal. I mean, yeah, and the energy of these suns, all these stars being distant suns, the burning, the fusion, all pouring its light over billions of light years to reach us, and you just feel it. And I wrote, the stars were like dazzling blue diamonds in a calm ocean of warm midnight. And it's just like, holy shit. I mean, so unbelievably beautiful.
And that's one of those things where we can say the words and we can be poets, but you cannot know it until you stand there and you look up after having vomit in the darkness.
Yeah, absolutely. Last line from that day, the healing has begun. So scrambled to get a couple hours of sleep. That was one of the challenges of the way that they'd set it up. Was sleep was in absolute scarcity, and I think if I was devising a plan, I would probably build in a little more time for sleep. There were some specific things about, I had different talks I was giving, so I actually had more obligations, which robbed me of even more sleep. But nonetheless, like getting some rest to integrate each journey is something that I would like to work with them to try and build in when I go back, because it's really helpful for me. Because Hamilton once told me, he's like, look, energy levels matter.
Yeah.
So I was struggling to fully like integrate all the things, because it's hard to get that night's rest, because you get to bed 4, maybe if you're lucky, and then you're up at 8 to get breakfast at 8:30.
Because you're hungry as fuck.
Because you're hungry, because you haven't had a meal the night before, and you only get 2 meals the next day. But nonetheless, like you just power through, and it really does train. On the positive side, it trains that kind of warrior
100%.
energy. Like, okay, like I don't have a lot of energy, but I'm going to show up anyways, and let's go, Hoka.
Yeah.
Night 2 rolls around, make it there, and so yeah, I'll start reading into this. And night 2 was more of like a accentuation of the feelings of night 1, just more deep cleaning, like more of the fever starting to come out, the fever of my sickness starting to purge.
Did you drink 2 cups at the very beginning?
I did.
Yeah.
I went 2 right off the bat at the start, because I didn't want to extend the experience.
I did the same thing.
So I wanted to front load the maximum. So night 2, and I wrote this in a slightly different way, but I'll just read it. It's remarkable what I accomplished for being a corpse. Limpia, limpia, cuerpocito, which is clean, the little body. Flushing the dead down the toilet. And really it was a moment of levity where I was like, wow, I've been largely clogged with death.
Wow.
But you know what? Like, I've still done some cool shit, despite being mostly a corpse. Like, I've done all right. And so it's just a kind of way to acknowledge myself and say, like,
that's so funny, because I see you on a day-to-day, and I that's great.
Yeah. And then into the lessons, which really this was, largely about the lessons. There's a couple of visions in night 2. When you are constantly looking for the reflection you want in everybody else's eyes, you don't know who you are. You are people-pleasing because you need the reflection of being liked to affirm that you are likable. When you really know who you are, as the one striving to grow, you are excited about your blind spots. You measure everything that comes with curiosity. And no matter what, you don't take anything personally. If it is a helpful reflection, you are grateful. If it is a biased reflection, it doesn't stick. In the uncertainty or the false identification, you are open to be wounded. So that was this real understanding of a lot of my challenge is just not really, truly knowing who I am. And so still, I'm looking for validation from my audience. I'm looking for validation from am I doing a good job? Am I being a good boy? Am I being a good boy, everybody? Am I being a good boy?
Yeah.
Like, and it's just screaming that out,
Yeah.
To myself, my own judge.
Yeah.
That own inner kind of adjudicator that's like, I don't know. Are you doing good or are you not doing good? Well, let's look at what the impact is. Let's read it from the rest of the world. And that's, it's a deadly, deadly trap.
There's a great idea that is presented in the book Anti-Fragile that I think is incredible. And it's like, there's fundamentally 2 types of systems. There's fragile systems and there's anti-fragile systems. And the myths that he uses to articulate that is the sort of, it starts with the D, Damoscles or something. Are you familiar? The sword.
Damocles?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's fragile. And then a hydra is anti-fragile. And the idea is one seeks to maintain what it is. And that's the boy asking, am I a good boy? I'm trying to stay static.
Mm-hmm.
Am I a good boy? Inherently fragile. The hydra is like a plant. It's like, what can I eat or go towards that will help me grow?
Yeah.
And it's a fundamental different orientation. And we all have got the fragile boy and girl inside of us, all of us, because if we weren't liked when we were infants, we died. So one of our deepest, and I think a lot of people in the spiritual community like whip themselves when they feel these feelings because they think that people like us don't feel these feelings.
Mm-hmm.
This is an eternal chord of the instrument that you are. Like,
Yep.
it's imprinted in you. And I think what the spiritual being is able to do is dance with it.
Yeah.
It's not something that I mean, I don't know anyone who's removed one of these core instinctual primal drives of having a human body.
I mean, it's radical transcendence. You know, you're talking, we can probably name the ones who've freed themselves of this, because it cuts all the way deep to the core of evolutionary biology. This is something we've been talking about, you know, for my book that we're working on, is ultimately, if you were not liked by your peer group in a tribal setting, the tribe could just leave you.
And you die.
You're alone in the wilderness trying to fend for yourself when we're social beings. So this social approval is just wired in deep. And yes, it still is important, but it's gotten twisted and it's gotten overwrought. And
Right.
we think that our physical appearance is the thing, and all of these things that we do and how much money we have, and all of these things are fine. Like, strive for those of their own intrinsic value to you. But like, this constant fear of whether you're doing it right or not is just going to cause you to sacrifice the truth of who you are over and over. And then the more you do that, the more you lose the truth of who you are.
Know.
And the more desperate you are to have a reflection to show you. You're looking in every fucking mirror you can, whether that's a barbell or whether that's an actual mirror or whether that's your Instagram or whether that's your lover or whether that's your parents. You're just looking in mirrors constantly. Like, can I see who I am? Can I see who I am? And fuck, it's exhausting.
Yeah.
You know, it's like an endless challenge. The false identification comes when you're attached to an idea of who you want to be. It is the identity of who you are not, built brick by spiritual bypass. This is a betrayal of your truth.
Yeah.
You identify as what you were striving for rather than identifying as the one who is striving, while honoring all aspects of self on all dimensions. And I got this phrase: it's great to act like Jesus, as long as you're Jesus. Otherwise, you're just full of shit.
I love it.
And that's the thing. Like,
Wow.
This is the core of spiritual bypass. Like, I am the one that you think that you're the one that you're striving to be. I'm like Jesus, and I'm going to act like this. Oh, I get attacked. I'm going to turn the other cheek. And that's who I am, because I'm the turn the other cheek Jesus guy. Meanwhile, there's the animal that's just building resentment and anger and vitriol. And one more little slap could be a tap on the shoulder, and all of a sudden it snarls out and spews all that spring-loaded venom that you've kept from the denial of yourself on all levels, because you've spiritually bypassed this. I mean, I could write volumes about this and speak volumes about this just from open relationship.
Yeah.
I was identifying as the one, I'm fine with all things. Yes, Whitney, sleep with whoever, because I have compersion for you and for them, because we're all connected. We are all one, different facets of the infinite diamond. And I'm like, you did what? You did what? Ugh. And then I'm like puking in the bathroom and like freaking out. And like, it just wasn't true.
Yeah.
And she would always ask, she was always good. She's like, is it okay if I do? Like, is it all right? Maybe not always, but most of the time she would ask, like, hey, is it okay if I go, spend a week with this guy? And I'd be like, yes, of course it is, because I am compersion open relationship Jesus. And I'm fine. And like day fucking 4, I was not fine.
Yeah.
And poor Whit, because like she would say, she got the verbal clearance from me, like, yeah, I'm fine. But I wasn't fine, and I was hardly ever fine.
Yeah.
So like, it creates so much turbulence. Whereas I just wasn't acknowledging really the truth of who I was on all levels. Yeah, some part of me, was that person who had compersion, and I was able to touch it from time to time.
Yeah.
But the integrated being along the full spectrum of who I was, from the animal all the way to the spiritual being, I was ignoring a good swath of that.
Yeah.
And that was leading to massive problems.
It really feels like the alchemy to spiritual bypassing is be brave, being a fucking animal. Like, admit and feel it fully and grieve it. Like, one of the most impactful books you've ever shared with me was recently, and it's The Smell of Rain on Dust. And it's all about grief and praise. And like, when we started the research on depression for the book, like, one of the biggest things that we see as wrong with our culture is we don't know how to grieve. We have an entire mental system set to numb you from grieving. But grieving is essentially the admitting that you're not Jesus right now.
Yeah.
That you're not the spiritual thing right now. But what I find is if you can get on your knees and cry, or admit when you're small, or admit when you have some shitty fucking opinion about something that is the opposite of quote unquote spiritual, that's the most direct path towards growing into that being.
Yeah. And, the challenge is it's also too often, we're not supported by people who have this knowledge, like the tribe that Martin Presto talks about in, The Smell of Rain on Dust, the tribe that knows and understands grief. So instead, and I get this all the time, I was just talking about this on a coaching call with the Fit for Service crew, I was doing this too. I was projecting all of this, frustrated anger from the denial of the animal aspect of who I was and like the ego aspect of who I was, which was deeply wounded. And I'd be like, you were doing this and I can't believe you do this. You're so inconsiderate, blah, blah, blah. And like, of course, when I'm pointing all arrows and all spears and all fucking barbed wire at the person, they're not fucking spiritual Jesus either. And nor do they have even the awareness to be like, I see that, you need to grieve. And I see that, let it out, just let it all out. And not because they're going to take it personally and it's going to be really hard and devastating. They'll be like, I did bad and I can't believe it. And they're going to internalize some of that, or they're going to mount back their other attack. Well, you did, and it creates this cycle where in truth, it's like, okay, child, like I see, just wail it out, out, grieve, allow yourself to grieve. And with intelligence from the individual and wisdom, real wisdom, be like, okay, I need to grieve this. I don't need to grieve it at somebody. And I certainly shouldn't be projecting this. This is my need to wail like a baby that was just birthed and had that cold air touching their lungs for the first time as their wet skin found themselves in this cold, different planet. And they're like, gah, and just crying there, screeching in grief. Like that's what we need sometimes. But instead, we'll point it at somebody. And then that creates, a traumatic experience for the person we're pointing it to, and the traumatic experience for us, because then ultimately we come out from that and we realize like, oh my God, I can't believe what I've done. I did it again. Yep. And then we compound that with our own shame after we release our fucking poison arrows. And then we think we're even worse and we have more shame, which then can drive us to even identify even more with something else because we're so ashamed of what we've done that we're in denial of what we've done. And it creates this vicious cycle where we just need to really get it out. And I think that's where breath work and ecstatic dance and having that community and a community that's like, can identify like, hey, do you need to grieve this? Do you need to let this out? Like, is there a part of your animal that just wants to fucking scream and yell, come on, we'll do it. We'll go down to the river. We'll go down to the water and like, just let it out. Like, let it all out. Like, I'll be there.
Yeah.
Like I'll be there for you. Like, let it all go. Curse and scream and cry and punch the sand and wail and scream to God, and move past it. And that would change so many things,
Yeah, the vision that I'm seeing is like I have some people in my life who have shown me this a couple of times. And I almost am afraid to see these people when I'm going through something hard, but they're the type of person where they look at you and you can just tell by the way that they're looking at you that they can feel your pain and they start crying. And that they see the part in you that needs to cry and they haven't even said anything. And you're like, fuck, I'm about to cry. And that's one of the beauties of having elders or, magicians in your tribe is like just those people that can look you in the eye. You don't have to give me a story. You don't have to give me reasons. I see that there's a part of you that needs to cry, and I will cry with you until you are done, and then we'll go get lunch.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've been blessed to have those people too, but it's funny, like the resistance to calling them up on the phone.
100%.
I remember Christine Hassler was one of those people that, I would like see her like, yeah, let's go get some coffee. Cool. We'll catch up. And then like, I'd just see her and just start crying,
Yep.
Because she could see.
Yeah.
And she was just without wordlessly holding space in her divine feminine. And I was like, but I think, and there's different ways and different people who can offer that, but such a gift when we can really offer that. And the problem is that we'll all too often get caught up in the words and the person will be trying to dissuade somebody to get on their side and agree with their justified position of why it's all this other person's fault. And then you'll start to build this, reinforcement of the story. You can't reinforce the story. You have to allow their story and just encourage them to get back to the root feeling and the release of the root feeling. And if stories have to come out, let the stories pour, but don't weigh in on the story.
Right.
The story doesn't matter.
It's always a shield. And I'm willing to bet, and I invite people who are listening to run this experiment. Every angry story ever told, behind it is a child that needs to cry. Like whenever you're telling a story in anger, even if it's about politics or whatever, if you just don't engage with the story as the listener and you try to just feel into the boy or the girl inside of them that's overwhelmed, that's crying right now. And the anger is the guard. And the lawmaking in the court of love or in the court of injustice or whatever, it's frantically trying to build this fucking suit of armor.
Yeah.
And that nothing that you do to the story can help the child cry. And so can you just be with the child that needs to cry?
I mean, it's like there's certain things that we need to fucking tattoo them on our hand.
Are they angry right now? They need to cry. Am I angry right now?
Yeah, exactly. It's like they're so important, and they're not like long lessons to have, but it's like you just can be reminded of this because there's so many times, especially when you're with somebody and you want to be sympathetic and maybe you even agree with their story.
Right.
Maybe you're like, yeah, fuck that person.
Fuck that.
Fuck that person. That's fucking bullshit. And then your anger gets redoubled in there. And then all of a sudden you're in this energy.
And you're just painting on their pseudo armor. You're not helping them.
And honestly, like Vi and I got caught in some stories in the rest day, the next day. And I won't go into that because it's involving our personal life. But we got caught in stories. And these stories were dragging us like a bull with that thing through their nose all the way through the fucking streets of muck.
Yeah.
And then eventually I had one phone call with a brother. And he was like, yeah, I hear your story. I don't necessarily think it's an accurate story. This is what I see. And I'm like, oh, well, that's a relief. And nothing changed other than my own story in my head.
Yeah.
But like we can so easily, and Vi and I, we're feeding each other. We were one-upping each other on the story. Oh yeah, fucking man, fucking that. And all of a sudden we were both like completely thrown off, couldn't take a nap, and we're all fucked up.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's important to just be mindful of all of that.
Hold the stories lightly and with a grin.
Mm-hmm.
Know that you must story if you're a human. Mm-hmm. Like, congratulations, you have a body, you have a mind, you'll tell a story. But the stories are fucking wisps of smoke at best, even the most beautiful ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh. All right. I am the one who is striving, not the one who has accomplished. It is a present tense, not a past tense identity. This is my purpose, to strive to heal completely. I am my purpose, a force, not so much a man. This is seizing the sword. This is the reclamation of my innate power. So this was really a key affirmation for me to just say, look, stop worrying about what you have been and what you're tending to be in all of these fixed positions. You are the one striving. And your striving is to heal. And this is your purpose. I am the one striving to heal. And if I can keep that in mind, I am the one striving to heal. Oh, there's something challenging. This is where all of the Stoic wisdom comes in and all of that. Oh, and that's why when you say that flippantly, oh, this person who's angry, that's my teacher. It's not if you're a person or if you're the thing that you're hoping to get to, that's just an annoyance.
Right.
But if you identify as the one, as a purpose rather than a being, but you're a purpose, and your purpose is to strive to heal. Well, then of course they're your teacher because they're giving you some resistance. They're the resistance training. They're the weights that are going to make you get stronger. But without that shift in identity, it's just going to be like, no, that's just a fucking nuisance. Right. That's just a weed. Let me pluck it from the garden, throw it in the wood chipper, and let's call it a fucking day, son. So yeah, that was kind of a key little affirmation, just to identify as the one striving to heal. Couple other random thoughts. One of the reasons that sport is so important to me is that the game is defined. I know my purpose because the game is small. I can measure myself clearly. It is the ultimate finite game. I can surrender myself in that game because I understand it. So I've always wondered why like sport is such a key thing for my life, and the world life is so complicated. It is the infinite game life.
Yes.
Life is like multifaceted and so beyond our even comprehension. It is dancing with the mystery. But basketball, simple. You know, what are we
First
playing
to 11.
Yeah, first to 11. First to 11, 2s and 3s and 1s and 2s.
Yep.
Clearly defined rules,
Yeah.
a clearly defined team, and a clear definition of when the ball is going in or not. Now, where is the contention when you're playing pickup basketball?
In the not clear their opinion or their story versus your story about it being fouls, right?
The only part that creates any conflict in
so
sport,
funny,
because it's such a clearly defined thing, is when you're calling your own fouls
Wow.
or you have a subjective opinion from the ref that's deciding whether this thing was clear or not.
Yeah.
That's where we have the conflict. But life, nothing is defined, so it's conflict everywhere. But like when we really understand something, you know, it's why like a game like shuffleboard, you know, is like really clear how many fucking things are left on the end of the board or not. There's no fouls.
Right.
You know, there's like no debate. You know, that's like, and so people hardly get in raging shuffleboard accidents. You know, whereas I've seen like basketball fights break out.
100%.
That's a bullshit foul. Fuck you, you know?
Absolutely.
Or even with the ref, like that's a fucking terrible call. You know, like what do people get mad about in the stands? Not the opponent making a great play. You know, I remember when I was a huge Kings fan, and there's this crazy moment where the Kings were trying to score on Patrick Waugh, who's an amazing goalie, like a Hall of Fame goalie. And there's a great move. I forget the Kings player who did it, but, you know, breakaway or 2-on-1 and a great move and a great shot. Patrick Waugh just gloves it and then winks at him.
God
and like,
damn.
it was devastating, but also, goddamn, did you admire it?
Yes.
You know, like everybody
100%.
was like, did you see that shit? That shit was nasty. You know, like that's not the thing. But I also remember like a bad call. Oh man, the Great Western Forum would be an outrage.
Yeah.
You know, fucking chanting at the ref so you blind the
That's
three
such a
blind
good
mice,
point.
you know? So yeah, and I think that's, again, it's so simple and it's so lovely. It's such a nice respite from the infinite game of the world to just like, oh, clearly defined game? Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's fucking go.
I have never considered that the point of contention in most sports is that part where it's not clearly defined.
Yeah.
And there's a great book that I would recommend to people called Finite and Infinite Games.
Yeah,
which
James
is
Carse.
the most on the sneak, holy shit, this is a spiritual text, not acting like a spiritual text I have ever read in my fucking life. And there's this interesting quality of finite games where to seek to win is to call an end to the game.
Yeah.
And that like, so there's the fundamental mystery, and then there's our response to the fundamental mystery, which is to try to put order on it. But if you create any type of game around the mystery of life that seeks an endpoint, it's to bring an end to life. There's something about the mechanistic archon and the game that we're playing as a culture that's led by politics and companies where they're trying to bring, like, they're trying to win. But to win a finite game is to end the game.
Yeah.
The big thing that he talks about in that book is an infinite player wins at the infinite game by acting in a way that allows it to continue.
The continuation of the game for all eternity to come.
Yeah.
That's the win. It's the playing. It's the playing,
Exactly.
not the winning.
It's not done. It's the being in it. Yeah. It's that book is fucking God.
But you can also understand that when people reduce the infinite game to a finite game, oh, my game is to make $100 million. Finite game. There's a actual scorecard, and the scorecard is your bank account.
Yep.
And if you're in that, you can lose yourself in that game, and there can be a great release from the sheer terror of the mystery and the unknowing. So I think we can also have sympathy for
100%.
the motivation for that.
Right.
Like, all right, let's reduce this to a power game in which there's a winner and there's a loser. I'm going to be the winner.
Yeah.
And so they're trying to create where it belongs. It belongs on the basketball court or on the pickleball court or whatever, on the golf course. That's where it belongs. Play all those finite games and have fun and keep playing them. Play again. Keep playing again. Like when we have a pickup game, it's not like I did it. I won the most games today. Never playing again. No, it's like this feels good for a little while, but it is the infinite game of continuing to play. But we have little breaks in it, and that's a healthy way to do it. But when you're stretching this out for a lifetime, and then your destiny, or not your destiny, but your who you are. I remember I went to this cemetery in Argentina, and everybody like. This famous Recoleta cemetery. And it was all of these monuments of these generals. And it was like, and this general fucking slayed this many people. And, was the terror of the indigenous. And he has like a flag and he's like holding like, like I am the champion of this. And we think that we're going to move on into perpetuity with our titles and our accomplishments. And we're going to have this big statue in our ceremony and everybody's going to give a shit. Who fucking cares?
Right.
But they're caught in this game of like, how many medals can I get on my vest? And will those medals be immortalized in this cemetery where everybody's going to see? And then my character that I'm playing is going to live on for eternity? No, you're going to live on for eternity anyways. Your character doesn't fucking matter. But it's just this misidentification of what's happening.
And the thing that comes to mind is that poem, I am Ozymandias, king of kings. Look on my work, ye mighty, in despair. And the person walking by just sees rubble. Like all he sees is that placard having that quote. And it's like, time's going to eat you, dude.
Yeah, always.
Yeah.
And fighting against it is absolutely futile. Time is undefeated.
And there really is compassion, because I've had a couple of moments where it feels like I faced eternity. It's the most terrifying thing ever, period.
Yeah.
So I totally understand.
Of course. And that's, as flippant as we are with the language, at the core of it is the deep sympathy.
Yeah.
Like the deep compassion for people just trying to figure out how to condense the sheer incomprehension of this infinite mystery into something that makes sense.
Yeah. Good luck.
Good luck. The suffering became intense. The nausea billowed in waves. The sweat squeezed out of me as if my pores were too tight to release the water. I reached out for Jesus. I whispered his name and felt him rising in my heart. The light of the Christ attracted the darkness of the shadow caterpillar. So I got to explain that.
No, just go on.
So I learned that, especially from St. Michael the day before, I learned I could call on allies. And, I called on St. Michael, and I got St. Michael appeared and was helped me guide. And I was just really suffering, in this place. Not scared necessarily, but it's just like, man, I was nauseous and I was sure I had to shit, but I was not sure I could walk. And so it was just like grumbling, and I wanted to like stretch to the side, but as soon as I would roll my legs over to do like a gentle twist, I felt like I will shit my pants if I do that. So I got to line back up straight up and just deal with the pressure that's on my sphincter. And then like I was sweating, but I was impossibly both hot and cold at the same time, where I needed to cover myself. But then when I covered myself, I was too hot. And it was like, So I was like, all right, who can I call? Man, fuck it. I'm going for the big dog. And I just started whispering Jesus. I was just saying, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. Jesus, 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 Jesus. And I half expected a being to come like St. Michael did and like, hey, here's Jesus, here I am. Not how it worked. I could feel pure love awakening from my center of centers right in my heart. And I was like, whoa. And I could feel that light growing in my chest. And to be honest, my heart chakra is often fairly clenched. It's not a common occurrence for my heart to be wide open. I'm a loving person, but I'm loving in spite of a largely clenched heart. And I have felt it flower, and I've felt it wide open, and it's the most incredible thing. And I could feel it opening, and this just light, the ecstasy of this light just of my heart opening. And then in a pretty neutral vision space, of course, there's things kind of happening, but as soon as it started to awaken, all of these strange little caterpillar-like shadow figures just went like, shh, and like popped up in my vision. And they were looking at me with curiosity, like, oh, is the Christ going to come? Is the Christ going to come? Oh, Christ is here. Great. And it was like moths to a flame.
Yeah.
They weren't like, evil by any means, but they were like nuisances almost. Like, and I was like, no, get out of here. They're very distracting because they're all of a sudden they're in my vision, like looking right down on me. And it was a really like interesting experience because I recognized at that point, like, oh, the darkness is attracted to the light. Like Jesus is the most immaculate light. And one of the beautiful aspects of the Christian religion is in creating these archetypes. They were one of the few that named the blistering edge of polarity as the Christ, of pure light. So if there's polarity and there's a spectrum of light and dark, they named the being at the very edge where you can't go any more in that direction. You've reached the pure light.
Because the thing that you're articulating is almost every other religion, all of their gods have some light and dark in them. Like
totally.
Zeus was a fucking asshole.
Yeah.
Odin is a little bit closer to the Christ consciousness, but like
a little bit. And you brought this up at dinner, and I had never thought about it before. But of course, Christ is the most blistering archetype that we've given a name and a story to, of the most extreme polarity of love or light or good. Yeah. Even in the Hindu traditions, you have Shiva and sometimes destroyer, sometimes creator, Brahman, all of these different Hanuman, but they're very much more like great beings that are people, sometimes fighting, sometimes loving, sometimes in the divine, sometimes always maybe in the divine, but not the blistering edge of turn the other cheek, love only and only love, always love, pure love all the time, which is like if God, if source, which is all light and all dark and everything, was split into a spectrum, it's just the being that's all the way on the end.
Right.
And it's very, very interesting and very cool that, Christianity had the audacity to create that being. I mean, it exists, but to name that being and then use that being, of course, it's been misguided and misinterpreted in many different ways.
Sure.
But nonetheless, that being in its essence, call it Jesus, call it the Christ, call it whatever, but, the universe understood what I was meaning by using that word.
Right.
And it was just starting to awaken. It's not like I became the Christ, but I was like just starting to awaken in my heart. And it's there, it's available in all our hearts. And that's what Jesus was trying to say. And you can read all of, Ted Decker's mystical writing to really understand the true mystical truth of what the Bible was trying to say when you interpret it with that lens. And I encourage people to do that. Ted Decker's just a fucking phenomenal, mystic storyteller. But in any case, it was just really interesting and a really interesting reminder that as you pull from center, there's magnetization to the other side of that polarity. So the light is magnetized to the dark as the dark is magnetized to the light. And, it occurred to me as well, like we've never heard, and we've been talking a lot about stories, and like Jordan Peterson says, stories are true stories when they represent something that's true in nature. And that's why we like stories that are true. It's like, oh, this feels right, and so we'll read these fantastical tales. But when there's darkness and like a really dark, force and a really light force, they never just like hang out. There's not like there's the dark force here and the light force here. And it's like, hey, what's up, demons? Like, what's up, angels? Have a good day. Like, oh, fresh donuts over here. Like, oh, sweet. Thanks, demon. Like, no problem, angel. Never.
Yeah.
It's always like, and the stories are always, they suck into each other, into conflict, trying to figure out, because they're pulled to each other.
Right.
Light is attracted to dark, always. And so that understanding of like, okay, this is just the tension of the game.
Right.
As light beings, we're going to be attracted to the dark because we want to bring light into the darkness. As dark beings, we're going to try and snuff out the light.
Yeah. There's this really great like short story that came to me when I was trying to understand like how the psyche responds to trauma. And it basically like, this was actually inspired by the story that you shared on episode 127 with Joe Rogan about the like Hindu cosmology, where there's like two gods. One is archetypically feminine and one's male, and they kind of almost agree to play a game. And it's like there's some force, I'm calling it psyche, that like is just all about growth. Like I am here to make life. And then her eternal lover is entropy. And entropy is like, I love you so much, My entire being is committed to making your creations more beautiful.
Yep.
The only way to do that, you have to kill them so they can adapt. And that's almost the like fundamental energetic thing that is happening. Is like all the dark, like we did a Wachuma ceremony a while ago, and someone just snuck in the most mystical line I ever heard, and it's the darkness serves the light. And I chewed on that for fucking weeks, and it kind of brought that story.
Oh no, yeah, and they're eternal lovers, light and dark, and that's I think why and I didn't necessarily understand it in the complexity that I do now, but in my previous ayahuasca journey, when I had a vision of, and this was an externalized vision of Jesus and an externalized vision of the devil, they were like in different sides of my visionscape, and then they immediately ran together and joined in a sexual embrace, where they were just making love. And I was like, whoa, that's fucking intense.
Yeah.
But like, I get it, it's because that the beings on one side to the other, the match, the polar match for that being is the absolute darkness. And that's what creates polarity. In that embrace, in that act of lovemaking is all of life and free will and the entirety of the universe. And combined only when they're in the embrace, God is there as the everything. The embrace of the light and the dark. Yep. Marina, Maestra Marina, the healer, was a fearsome force. She was Baba Yaga, simultaneously capable of incredible healing and, should she decide, absolute obliteration. So that comes from, I was lying with my head facing the healer towards the center of the room, and she came, and she's just this beautiful, sweet woman in the day. And then in the ayahuasca scape, I could just see her, of course, with my eyes closed, just enshrouded in these intensely beautiful, robes with the Icaro patterns and the Shipibo prints and these long kind of talons and this and she was singing her song of like pure healing and love, but it didn't hide the fact that if she was like, today I'm not going to be a healer, today I'm going to fuck you up. Like, she was absolutely like a fearsome, ferocious force of like that feminine quality of nature, like all of the fangs and the venom and the nails and, the spiders and the snakes and the wind and the tidal waves and the earthquakes and the everything she had within her. But today she was just, the agua florida blowing gently over my body and the sweet song setting my energy in right accord. And for me, when I was working with her and her Icaro, no matter what chaos was going on, I mean, I just described my previous chaos and, opening Jesus kind of helped, but then the caterpillars distracted me and I kind of lost my track and didn't really stick with it. And so I was still back in the suffering, trying to figure out when I was going to poop. But when I was with Marina, like everything just settled. It was like a deep, deep peace, and I was like, oh man, that was good. That was like really, really necessary and really needed. And so it was just beautiful to experience her recognizing her ability to jump into the other polarity if she so choose, but that she was just choosing to be this like beautiful, beneficent healer.
Something that I have felt with Teo in that space and what it felt like you had with her is in the ayahuasca space, you get the opportunity to touch the fullness of the archetype of the feminine, capital F, or of the masculine, capital M. And like for the feminine, like to really even take in for a moment the bigness of Mother Nature. Like it can fucking destroy you if it even loses its sense of presence for a moment. It's so powerful. It can just fucking end you. But it's also supporting us right now, like our mother's body when we were growing inside of it. If it chose to attack us, we die.
Yeah.
But it held us too. And like just be like, it's so hard to, with our conscious mind, to be able to tap into the archetypical capital F feminine whenever you interact with a woman. And likewise for the capital M masculine. But man, in that ayahuasca space, when the shaman is 8 inches from you singing and you can smell the ayahuasca on their breath, they're so close.
Yeah.
Like the opportunity to taste the bigness of that force that is inside of you, it is right there.
Yeah. Yeah, and Teo for me was just such a gentle force of love. It was just like sunshine in warm weather, and
We had a different relationship.
Yeah, it was really interesting how both of them interacted, but it was, and always by the end of Teo Zikuro, like I noticed a big shift, but it was so subtle and like so like brought me on this journey where only at the end did I realize I was way different than the start. You know, whereas like Marina, I could feel it was so rapid. It was like rapid. I was like, whoa, all right. And sometimes driving me, you know, then the following night really drove me into a deep lesson that I needed. Just drove me deeper. And I think that was part of her. And I think that was part of both of their intentions for night 3 was to drive things as deep as possible. They know the course of things. They're not going to try and blow you out of the water night 1 or night 2. They're regulating the energy along with the plants. And so night 2 was really just like giving me a deep peace, you know, for a moment. And man, I was fucking thankful for that. Judgment is the way the ego climbs in hierarchy, stepping on the heads of everyone so that it can stand above the crowd. So it consider itself worthy. So it can consider itself worthy. It is an act of separation, a denial of the inherent unicity and interbeing. Judgment's been a big thing for me. I think it's a big thing for all of us.
Yeah.
And I really came face to face with the understanding of what judgment's purpose is. Like the ego knows itself in relative position. It doesn't inherently know what it is because it's a fiction. It's a story. It's an idea. We're an idea of who we think we are. We've got named, we got a body, and then the ego is like, I am all of this stuff, I think. You know, it's not, you know, like Paul Selig says, what's true is always true. The ego isn't always true. It's always changing and it's always created. It's a tool that allows us to navigate the level of density that we're currently at. Right. It's a necessary and beautiful tool, but nonetheless, it doesn't know where it is. So its purpose is to judge itself in relative position. Again, going back to tribal standards. Exactly. If I'm better than these 5 people, well, if we're playing, you know, Survivor, and, you know, the tribe has spoken and we got to cast a couple people out because there aren't the resources. Well, if I'm better than these 5, well, I'm going to last and I'm going to survive. And so the ego is constantly playing Survivor and it's constantly trying to put itself above. And if it can judge other people, well, anybody you judge and the more harshly you judge them, the more you stand above them. And I think that's what we're doing in society. We're so in our ego that we're trying to find every other way to categorically and individually judge everyone. This skin color, judgment. This wealth status, judgment. This sex, judgment. This thing, judgment. Oh, you said that, judgment. Oh, you didn't do that, judgment. Oh, this, judgment. Oh, you look like this, judgment. Every single possible fucking way we can, we're judging because we're desperate to be ahead from this innate fear of scarcity that maybe we're going to be left behind and maybe we aren't worthy of love after all. But that's the impetus for judgment. It's to really step on other people to try and gain height.
What's wild is to the degree that you judge outwardly, it's almost like like a law of existence. You judge yourself that harshly. And so the more frantically you're seeking to get status by judging other people, those people who do the most judgment, who do the most judging, if you could get them alone in a room and you looked at them like you knew that there was a child inside of them that needed to cry, they're the ones with rampant depression, rampant anxiety, bipolar, whatever the conditions are. But it's because as we do outwardly, we're doing inwardly. And to have compassion for there is a very scared animal in you, especially if you've been traumatized or if you haven't known what it feels like to really get into the flow of the song of your life. Like, it is your nature to try to elevate yourself over other people because your genes think that it's required for you to get them into the next generation. Like your reputation and your status is such a huge correlation to whether or not you would reproduce.
Yep.
But you also have motherfucking consciousness. You have sovereignty over how you use this. And if you're in someone's Instagram comment section and you're attacking them, you are probably at a point where when you're alone with your thoughts at night, you are fucking killing yourself. And if you can just take a step back from the Instagram comment section and ask yourself, what can I do today that can forgive the part of me that is that I'm radically judging? And maybe start to step more into that rainmaker thing.
Because once you recognize like who you are beyond your own judgment of self, you don't need to judge other people, because that's not the way that you justify who you are and justify your value. And the priority of putting the ego in relative position disappears. So if you're doing that, it means you're identified with the ego. And if you're identified with the ego, you're judging yourself accordingly, because that's the whole reason why you're doing the whole thing. So it is a clear and absolute sign that you are in a forgetting of who you really are.
And I think a lot of people get stuck on this. Judgment and discernment are different. And the metaphor I give people, because I think it's funny and it also thinks that it helps, is that judgment is a doctor telling a surgeon that their patient is a fat ass slob. Discernment is the doctor telling the surgeon exactly what the cholesterol is and what the weight is and what the body fat is. That's not judgment. That's discernment.
Yeah.
And there are people out here that need to be discerned.
Yeah.
In your life and in yourself, but judgment is not useful.
The other aspect of the ego is to create boundary. The ego is necessary so that we don't dissolve into an amorphous being back to the unicity anyways.
Right.
That defeats the purpose of the game. Like
the ego gets you to the bathroom so you don't shit yourself in the middle.
The ego says, I am not everything. I am not God. Ego, I am. I am not. And that's what it's saying. I am this, which means I am not. So it inherently implies a boundary, and that boundary is necessary. And discretion, depending on that boundary, is necessary. If you got a tractor coming to you and you don't have any ego, it'd be like, I am the pavement as well as the tractor, and I will just get mowed into mush.
I've never heard it articulated that way, and that I feel like that elegantly captures the whole thing. The ego says, I am not.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's something that we can honor, but also just be mindful of. And awareness is the fucking game. Anthony DeMello nailed it. Like awareness is so much. I don't know what percentage, but it's just such a key part of the game. And then remembering the awareness and the remembering of the awareness is, because you can touch awareness and then forget.
Oh yeah.
Which is also the human experience. The delusion of a story or of a spell of manipulation appeared like a billowing cloud of smoke. It clogs the senses. It shrouds the truth. When you call it by its name, delusion, the smoke reveals the dark truth behind it. The sacred geometry returns, revealing judgment, anger, or jealousy. So I found myself caught in a story, and a story that brought up a lot of anger and brought up a lot of, judgment that I had, in my personal life, in the ayahuasca visions. And I all of a sudden I was in this place of fractal geometry. And as I said, it wasn't uncomfortable, but it was also beautiful. It was like the beautiful hell that I was currently in. And it was gorgeous. It was all the sacred geometry and all the things. But as soon as I got in that story, I noticed that my vision, it was all smoke. And it was just all like black smoke, and all of the fine edges of the crystalline geometry of the space dissolved into this clouds. And as soon as I think that really was what drew my attention. I was like, because I'm caught in the story and I'm thinking about it and I'm just seeing in the background, I'm just seeing this vision. And then I was like, whoa, my visionscape really changed here. And then it made me aware of my story, and I was like, oh, my story and this visionscape are linked. I was like, let me get behind this story. Oh, okay, I'm angry. Okay, I have a lot of judgment. And as soon as I did that, the smoke cleared, and what I saw was the geometry returned, the sharp edges and the things, and But it was still black. It was still dark, but it was like a beautiful dark. It was like a black prism,
Yeah.
like a smoky quartz.
Mm.
It was like a black prism in this. And there I saw my judgment for what it was. Beautiful, but dark. But it was real. It was real. It wasn't the story. It wasn't the delusion. It wasn't my blaming and projection and my othering onto that, person that I was thinking about. It was just the truth of what I was feeling. And I recognized that's such an important move because I was lost in this thing. And as soon as I named it, I was like, okay, that's my story. That's my delusion. Or a manipulation or whatever, any way that you're lost in the fog of delusion. As soon as you name it that, it dispels it, literally dispels it.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah. And then the sacred geometry returns, even if it's dark, even if you're looking at something that's, anger, whatever, things that are dark, it's still like, it's real. It's not delusional.
One of the things that I hear in a couple of your stories that I also experienced in a couple of moments when I most recently did ayahuasca was it feels like the ego dies, but there's still a story-making thing. And I guess it's the ego, but whatever. But that you don't realize your story-making most of the time. And one of the beautiful things that ayahuasca will do for you is we'll use the visionary space as almost this tuning fork that will respond to the stories that you're making that are unconscious, and that you can literally create visions for yourself in that space. Not specifically what the vision is, but you can change the vision through changing either your emotional state or the stories that you're telling. Like you called in the Jesus experience by saying Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
You removed the smoke by removing the fog from the story.
Yep.
I had one moment where I got so excited that I saw in the visionary space like sparks coming out of me, and it feels like one of the main things that Aya taught me the very first time I drank is it's like, you're not just here to lay the fuck down and receive. Dance with me. Like meet me.
Yep. Such a good lesson. Like let's go. Like let's be an active. I think I think a lot of things. There's a good advice, which is witness. Witness and allow, absolute surrender, and that's important. In some aspects, because if you're really too attached to your stories and too attached to your fear or whatever, and you take it too literally, then you can find yourself in some dark spots. And ayahuasca is, it's breaking the fever, but in the fever, you could die in the fever, like literally, depending on what your mental history is and depending on what other substances you might not have, weaned off of appropriately. Like this is no trivial thing, so it is very important to, to lean towards and have as your default surrender. But when you've gotten that, then like the highest articulation is, okay, now let's dance, let's, in a surrendered way, but let's dance. Let's be curious. Let's be creative. Let's ask. Let's, with utmost respect, not try and steer, not trying to drag, that'll be hell.
She will
whoop you.
Black belt judo, jujitsu
totally.
of interdimensional consciousness.
Totally. But that's, it's really a great way to start to, dance with the medicine.
And it feels like there's a set of rules to dancing in the psychedelic space that I feel like intuitively I've learned through dreams, but you can't, it's kind of beyond articulation, at least at this point in my development, but like you can't make it be other than what it is, but you can absolutely dance with it and add energy and
All right. Being in truth is essential for the spiritual warrior. Every act of deception, every time you choose trying over being, is a subtle transgression against the soul, a defilement of your divinity. Every swallowing of your words becomes a sickness festering. Do it long enough, your divinity will be buried under the rot of your mendacity. Truth is a motherfucker. It's on one hand so simple, on the other so hard to really be in that, because we've built a sandcastle on trying, bypassing, pretending that we're all good. I'm a good person. I'm a good boy. I'm a good girl. And we've been trained in that from, parents, school, coaches, friends, lovers, everything. There's a certain way that we get approval, a certain way that we navigate. And so to really express the truth, we're terrified that we're going to lose love from ourselves if we even acknowledge the truth to ourselves, because we've internalized all those constructs. But it's the ultimate prison, as we said. And just to live in the blistering truth, really expressing the truth, even if it costs you.
Yeah.
It's like Chogyam Trungpa, the warrior's decency is the absence of strategy. It's just not trying to be strategic, not spinning the 8 ball, not saying, well, I'm going to say this and then this. And people always mistake this and be like, well, if if someone's fat and you call them fat, that's not very nice. That's not truth. It's your judgment. You want to tell the truth? I have a deep issue with judgment. And my judgment is telling me that I believe that you're fat. And so I want to spew this onto you.
Yeah.
Like you could, if you wanted to really express that truth, put it all on yourself and reveal the ugliness of the inherent patterning of your own judgment, fine. But it's not truth to say like, you're this. It's not true. They are what they are. It's your judgment that is actually being exposed.
Right.
So people mistake that all the time for like real truth is a real acknowledgement of beyond the fog of delusion. Like what is the sacred geometry behind it? What is the feeling? What is the way in which you're saying your worth is determined by how you look or how you appear or what's beautiful, which is all conditioned and which is all relative. So like it's all, it's all nonsense. So like, but it's hard. It's hard to be in a world where everyone tells the truth. I think it was, Bertrand Russell that had a thought experiment. He said, if all of a sudden everybody could read everybody else's minds, then everybody would hide in their house in horror that someone could read their thoughts. Yeah. But over time, after several days, people would start to interact and they would realize, wow, everybody's as fucked up as me.
Yep.
Everybody has these terrible, shitty thoughts, these intrusive thoughts, these things, these thoughts of violence that don't even make any sense, that I don't even want to do. But I thought about punching that person and I thought, I had this fork and I wanted to stab this person in the eye. I didn't really want to, but I thought about it. Yep. Like, and we're terrible. Oh, and I thought about having sex with this person. I shouldn't have been thinking about having sex with this person. What's wrong with me? Like we have all of these things, but we have all of these things just exist and we all share them. But we're so far away from that, that it's very difficult because then all of a sudden you're the only one telling the truth and you're surrounded by people who are pretending that they don't feel the same way when they do in their own way.
When I connect to like some of the research that we did for the book is that the highest correlation to early death is not being obese, it's not being alcoholic, it's not smoking a pack of cigarettes a day, it's feeling alone. And that loneliness is not correlated with the amount of people that are around you. It's correlated to whether or not you feel seen. And it seems to be what allows you to feel seen is, are you vulnerable? Which essentially means, do you tell the truth? And I remember, man, when I was in my early 20s, I had built up this ego around basketball and around being good with women. And that's basically the entirety of my life. And I had a bunch of things that I had shame about. And I could feel every day I was afraid. And I didn't know why I was afraid. It was because I was afraid of being caught in one of my lies. And the amount of mental energy that is consumed by trying to manage your lies, about trying to be strategic with how you manipulate the people around you and whatever the thing is. I've now tasted what it feels like to genuinely in my psyche feel that I'm in truth with every human that I know. And the fucking like heavenly freedom of like, there are people who are upset with me. There are people who will not talk to me anymore. But I am not worried about being seen. I don't feel like I'm hiding something. When I go to bed at night, I'm not ruminating about the lies I have to keep up with or the people that I have to manage. And the fucking freedom that you personally get from doing it, that's good enough. But then there's the witnessing and the people around you who you know are hiding their truth. Every time you tell the truth, you can see that there's a part of them that's like, is it safe for me to finally put down
Yeah.
all of this shit that I am crushing myself under? And man, like one of the best experiences about being a human is it's like 2 a.m. and you're just talking with one of your friends and they finally say something that you've already known, but you can see that it's the first time they've ever said it. And it's like, you were saying that moment seeing the stars is worth the entire night of ayahuasca. Man, seeing someone you love finally tell the truth is worth all the bullshit that you've ever gone through with them in that single moment.
Yeah. You know, I talked to Raghu Marcus recently on his podcast, the Mind Rolling podcast, and he was good friends with Ram Dass, and Ram Dass would get with Raghu and a couple friends, and they would have these intimate conversations where they all just volunteered the truth.
No.
And he was like, you know, he asked me, he's like, what do you think was the truth that everybody was hiding? I was like, sex, man. Sex, for sure. And he was like, yep, nailed it. You know, there's like all of them, you know, talking about all their lusts, and all their fantasies and all the, you know, dark and light thoughts that they've had about their sexuality. And and there's the places where there's the most shame, and in our Western society, there's been the most shame placed on sexuality, is where there's probably the most truth, you know,
the most opportunity for healing.
Yeah, and I think I talk about this coming up, but you know, one of the beautiful things about being in the open relationship, which I loved, is that even though it was painful as hell, there was a lot of honesty about our lust and our desire to be with other people. And, you know, as much as there was problems, as much as I could never fully handle it, damn, it felt good to be in truth about that and not pretending like, no, yeah, like fucking monogamy, I'm so in, so fucking down. I love this. It's my favorite. You know, like, which is the default for everybody. Everybody just pretending like, no, this is great for me. It's great for you.
Yeah.
We haven't had sex for 3 months, but whatever. You know?
Yeah. This person I want to build my life with for the rest of my life, I'm just going to fundamentally lie to them. Yeah. We call it monogamy.
Yeah. And that's the thing. And it's so really deeply understanding. And what I always say is like, it's not necessary to act on anything, but it is necessary to be in truth.
Yep.
It is absolutely necessary. And you got to bridge that, as bumpy as it is, you got to bridge that gap and just have your teammate, have your ally be like, yeah, like I get it. You know, you got that lust in you. You got that. And that was a big part of my night 3 is just reckoning that force that is lust, and why in the sacred text, it's always one of those things. It's the hardest to overcome. And I think you mentioned a story about that as well at dinner, and we'll get to that when we get to it. But it's just a force. But having an ally there, you know, like, so for me, having Vailana, where we're really open about it and we can express it. We've learned how difficult it is to act on it. And I know firsthand. So I'm not desiring to go back and actually act on it, but I must have her there with me in acknowledgement and in realization, in the light of the truth of what I'm feeling. Otherwise, we're going to be separate.
Yep.
We're going to be each having our own experience, and that's not sacred union.
Absolutely. Like, one of the things that I try to share with people about this whole like truth sharing shit is it's not like you make a list, you go to your partner, you're like, okay, here's all the things that I've ever not told you. It's when you're in the moment, in the part of the conversation that you're in, just like if a song's playing, you can intuitively feel that there's a thing that wants to leap out of your body. There's a truth that wants to come out that you can now feel, oh, I can't hear what they're saying anymore because I'm trying to fucking not. That's the thing that you share today in this moment. And then this comes back to faith. Like, have faith. Like, one of my favorite faith claims is, if I speak the truth to the best of my ability, whatever happens as a result of that is the best possible thing that can happen.
Amen.
And then buckle the fuck up.
Yeah, and just be willing to deal with the temporary nuisance of having to deal and hold space for whatever emotions this might bring up, and you have to bite the bullet. Otherwise, you just suffer a slow death, and the rot builds, and then you end up corpsing it out in some ayahuasca mat somewhere, which is fine. I've been there. I'm all right. Here I am, still laughing, still smiling. So if you're there, all good. Like Alberto said, we can fix anything but dead. That's the good news. You become invincible when you truly know who you are and love as love. Everything else is just temporary delusion. Your truth creates your boundary. That was important for me to realize. Like, you think about these ideas of setting your boundaries and blah, blah, blah. Just tell the truth. It's so simple. Just like it'll create it naturally.
Yeah.
If like someone is offending you or not seeing you or whatever, and you're like, I don't feel very seen right now. And maybe that's on me and I can look at that, but maybe it's also, something to take a look at. And you continually say that like, yep, once again, not really feeling seen. Oh, if you just continue to express it and just hold the line, eventually someone will be like, fuck it, I'm out. I can't deal with it. Okay. That makes the most sense. But you don't need to like, we got to create a boundary. And the boundary is that maybe, but if you just always tell the truth,
right,
the boundaries will form naturally.
Right.
You'll be expressing what you're saying and they'll be responding to
it. The seeking to tell the truth is you basically saying yes to beginning a relationship with what's happening in your body. Like, most people in the West are so disconnected from their body. And your body, through you speaking the truth, will show you where the boundaries of your territory are. And that those boundaries can always move. Like, a huge lesson that I've learned, from you and from other people around us is, before I got here, it was like, oh, if I feel this right now, then this is the thing forever, for always.
Yeah.
And for sure, that was my boy fearing the uncomfortableness of, oh, life is eternal and undulating and boundaries will reform. Nah, fuck that. I'm making my wall today. And if it crumbles, let the barbarians in. I'm not going to adapt. But like, the beautiful thing about relationships is, one, if you run the faith experiment, that you're actually calling in exactly the type of person that you need to reveal to yourself, like a new part of you. And then you just bring your truth to it. They will show you like, oh, this boundary that I thought I had my entire life is actually different now. Or, wow, I finally have the power to claim a boundary that I've never claimed in my entire fucking life, because I've been told by everyone that I just need to be a good little girl and not say anything,
Mm-hmm.
And finding more of yourself through the act of telling the truth with other people. And they're actually like, if you believe in soul contracts or whatever, they came with all their shit to help bring out a little bit more of you, and you'll find it through telling the truth.
Yep. Amen. Judgment. I'll say it again. The ego's cheap wine, a way to cling to a blanket of self-righteousness, hoping that it will provide you warmth, but it won't for long. The chill of your lonely mountaintop will require more and more righteousness as a blanket, but you will never get warm. So you will need to continue to climb to even greater judgment. The endless challenge. You're stepping on people, you're judging more, and you're trying to warm yourself in the righteousness of who you are as better than everybody else. But that doesn't actually keep you warm. So you're like, well, if I keep stepping on people, I'll have more righteousness. And it's an endless challenge.
If you win the judgment game, your reward is to be alone.
Totally. There you are, all by yourself. King of the world. Congratulations. Absolutely alone. Not the way. It's a path to hell. Yeah, leading directly away from the kingdom. Sacred union is not a title to be won. It is a practice. It is choosing the relationship first, knowing that it is the relationship that nourishes the individuals. It is finding the harmony of your songs. All relationships are based on your own perspective. The spectacles of perspective tint the color of your relationship, even your relationship with yourself. So there's a couple things in that where I was just, and we'll try to go through them here. So, first of all, like, again, understanding that in the infinite game, like Vi and I have claimed we're in sacred union. All right, that doesn't mean shit. It's a practice. It's the thing that we're aspiring towards,
Right.
not the title that we have because we declared it and we wrote it down somewhere and talked about it on podcasts. Like that doesn't work like that.
It's Michael Scott on The Office saying, "I declare bankruptcy."
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's very much it. So, and what I realized it's choosing the relationship first, knowing that if the relationship is strong, it's the fountainhead that nourishes both individuals. And then I really understood that it was the harmony of the song. So one of the challenges for Vailana and I in the ceremonies was she swims in ayahuasca like a fish in water. Not like she doesn't have a few challenging things come up, but ultimately she just fucking loves it. And she popped out of that Maloka, night 1, night 2, night 3, and she was just on fire. She's like, oh my God, like just blasting this positive energy of like how amazing her thing was. And maybe an hour later, I got to be like, yeah, I had a pretty hard night. You know what I mean? And like ultimately that was tough. And I think ayahuasca was bringing up,
Yep.
and this is no slight to her, it's just like, she was so enthusiastic about it. She wanted to like share that, but it was the song that she was singing was so like happy, skippy, lucky that it actually drew me more into my own retraction because there was no harmony in that, And what I really realized is like in any relationship, there's the words or whatever, but really more importantly, it's the song. It's the energetic song.
Amen.
And so if someone's playing one song and someone's playing another song, it can be completely disharmonious. Like if you're hearing two different types of music, sometimes they'll seam together, and it'll be like a mashup. But sometimes it's just like, whoa, this is just discord.
Yeah.
And we were in, discord for a lot of the first, because I'm going through this deep healing, and she's like the flowering of her divine goddess self in the lap of Mother Ayahuasca, right? And ultimately, what I realized is the thing that a lot of people will do is they'll try to sing the same song as the other person. Well, that's not good because it redoubles. Like if someone's singing a pity song, this is my pity song, life fucking sucks and I'm terrible. And someone's like, I'll sing your pity song, your life fucking sucks and life is terrible. And you're like, yeah. And then all of a sudden you're in a chorus and your song is even stronger. That doesn't help.
Especially if it's not your true song.
Right. Which never, if it's your pity song, it never is. It's just an indulgence of something that you're singing temporarily. However, if someone like, you're singing your pity song and they're like, and now I'm singing the fucking happiest song that ever was, like, then you're going to be like, oh, wow. Not only did that make me feel kind of ashamed, like, fuck, I really got to heal a lot. She's flying and I can't meet her and that. And I wish I could sing that song. I can't. I don't have the notes. Like, I don't have the life force to meet her in that. So I was just getting more kind of ashamed. But there's always a bridge song. There's a bridge song, which is still like happy, but it's a little slower tempo. And it's a song that I can say like, yeah, I can move my song a little closer to that song, and we can meet in the middle song and sing that song together, a song of pain, a ballad of pain, and a ballad of growth, and a ballad of joy. And there's a way that we could bridge always in the songs that we're singing that would bring harmony to our relationship, which would ultimately nourish both of us because it would allow that resonance to come in. And, there's other times, it's not that it's only been one way. I've certainly been blaring my own song, not paying attention to her song. And there's an interesting moment. Like sometimes if you have a song and, someone's singing a really weak song and your song is really strong and you just have that instinct, like you keep singing it, you're going to see the corner of their lips turn up in a smile and their song's going to break and they're going to be like, fuck it, we're singing a fucking jig, like I'm going to dance with you. And you can have that kind of smile like, hey, come on, I'm going to keep singing it. I'm going to keep singing it. I'm going to keep singing it. And they're like, no, okay. And then there's like a beauty, but that's like a good DJ knowing like, yeah, we're going to keep singing this and it's going to, but you have to be listening. You have to be really listening to know when that's going to work. And so again, it's not singing the same as the other person, but it's just finding the bridge tunes to make the other person feel welcome and feel. And that's, I think, a big part of like bringing relationship to fruition. I know so many relationships that people aren't really seeing each other and aren't really in accord, and they're just singing different songs. Someone's really like always light and joyful and bouncy, and the other person's really heavy and somber, and they never seem to be in the same song.
Yeah.
But if they could both stretch a little bit to the middle ground, and both just reached comfortably. It doesn't have to be the same in the middle, but something that's in harmony. I think it would be really like positive and accretive. And as we kind of brought that into awareness, the rest of the journey was so much sweeter, and we got closer and closer and closer rather than drifting apart, because it felt like, okay, she's singing this song, I'm singing this song. It was really, really like an important metaphor to understand there for a relationship.
What I love the song idea, and that there being a bridge song. And one of the things that comes up for me is like, when you track the development of a musician, there's the first stage where they don't even know how to make a coherent song. But then once they start to get good, but they don't really believe that they're good, they have to show out. And they have to fucking do super complex, intricate, crazy, big things. But the OGs, like the old heads who know how to play the song, what do they all do? They do jazz. And what, like, the fundamental part of jazz is, I'm going to listen.
Mm-hmm.
And only after I've listened do I start to play the song that's true to me, that complements what's already in the space. And
exactly.
And it feels like the creme de la creme of relationship is listen to what's already in the space and then bring the fucking jazz to it.
That's it, man. That's it. Fundamentally, I mean, it seems simple, but like that metaphor, fuck, that was like landing on a shore of like, this is solid. Like, this is really, in a way, to take it without blame.
Right.
Because then you're not lost in the story of the words and trying to figure out it's just the song. It's just not really listening to the music that's in the space, and then playing your instrument that makes it. It doesn't mean that you can't steer the jazz towards 100%. Another area. But you gotta first listen and find the groove, and then move the groove into that other place. And then they'll
That's
move
a great
with
point.
You.
It's like the way to move is you first have to get harmony with what's there.
Yeah.
And then from that place you can,
And whether you're a friend or whether you're a coach or whether you're a counselor or whatever, like that skill of being like, get right in there, get right in there in harmony, and then, take it to where it can go, and know that, and then you're really creating music together, and both of you are going to come out of that experience refreshed and closer together.
So many people don't know that they're starving to simply be listened to. Like we're also afraid to be seen, and you can see it like mirrored in people not making eye contact, but it's also like we're afraid to feel other people. And so they're talking and we're just waiting, and we're like, oh, I've got so much shit that I don't want to feel. I'm just going to wait for them to stop talking. I'm really not going to connect anything that they're going to say. And then I'm going to regurgitate my idea of what I think is the right response. It's like those really bad DJs that already have the like all set list out. They already know all 15 songs that they're about to play. They're not listening to the fucking crowd. They have no ability to do any impromptu new songs. And just the healing that can come from listening to someone you love, just listening. Jazz.
And then knowing when that point is, because even if someone's, got a real sad song going, if you're really listening, you'll know when that point to laugh is. In that moment where like there's a bit of laughter that's right under the surface.
Yeah.
And then you get that, and then all of a sudden there's a whole new music sheet, and you can start playing a different a different track,
Yes.
And that's that's real mastery of interpersonal communication. And then, as this kind of second night, another purge, another night of the fever kind of mounting, and then, me cleaning a lot. I started to get in touch more with a kind of like understanding of who I was, and a feeling like, all right, I feel like we're going to make it out of this. And so that was a cool feeling. It was still, I was still deep in it, but nonetheless, it was like I had a lot more confidence and a lot more faith that the healing was working. And then that set up for rest day, and then night 3 and 4. But once again, as we should have expected, We're going to have to part 2 this bitch. So yeah, man, any closing remarks before we wrap this up and come back again fresh to talk about the second half?
I've enjoyed jazzing with you, and that's it.
Likewise, brother. Likewise. And I told you this already, like there was many times in this, especially after night 3, where I was like, man, I'm going to call Godsey tonight. And I know Godsey goes to sleep early because he's very disciplined, but I'm sure that Wyatt's awake. And if Wyatt's awake, Wyatt can wake him up, and then I'll call him and then I'll talk to him deep into the night, and it'll be cool. You know, we're homies like that, and he'll be there for me. And then after an hour, I was like, I think I'm okay. I'll be all right. I'll talk to him when I get back. But it's just it's such a pleasure to be able to share life with you, man. So
likewise, brother. And I would have answered.
Yeah, I know you would. I know. Love you guys. Look forward to sharing more of everything. And love you too, Ryan.
Love.
Love, love. Thanks for tuning into the show, everyone. Next week will be part 2, where we cover nights 3 and 4 of the ayahuasca journey. Night 3 being one of the most powerful nights I've ever had on any medicine in my life. So make sure to check it out. And once again, thanks to our sponsors, Onnit.com, thecoldplunge.com, and the Fit for Service Academy app. See you next week.